Let's get started. Sonia's here. All right, Gary, I'm going to turn it over to you, I guess.
Thank you, Chair. So Commissioners, this is a planning session to discuss the Park Avenue Community Project Phase 2, outcomes and recommendations. This is an almost 2-year project, which is almost near the completion line. So we thank staff and the community for their excellent work. We have Karen Buehring, the Long Range Planning Manager of Transportation and Development, who will lead the session. And we have members of the Park Avenue Community Advisory Committee. So Karen, would you please introduce our guests and then go ahead?
Yes, excellent. Well, it is very good to see everyone. So today we have with us as a part of the presentation team here in your room, Valerie Chapman, who is the chair of the Community Advisory Committee, and Ann Muir, who is the vice chair. Craig Van Valkenburg is a member of the Community Advisory Committee, as well as Sherry Grau. She is a Community Advisory Committee member. And then Erin Riom is the project manager for the consulting team side. So this is the group that will be providing the presentation today. There are also other consulting team members as a part of the attendee list, as well as other CAC members. So when we get into the question and answer, it's possible that maybe we bring those folks in. But for right now, we can start with this as a part of the room, if that makes sense.
Sounds good.
All right. Well, I will be sharing my screen today and running the presentation for everyone. The presentation was included as a part of your attachments. It's attachment 7. We have made some minor adjustments to that presentation to reflect some information that came in over the past week. So when we're done with this, I will send that updated presentation to Christina, but there really was only some small tweaks to it. All right. All right. Commissioners, I just have to say that I'm honored today to be here with representatives from the Park Avenue Community Advisory Committee. In all my 24 years of working with the county, this project really has had the deepest and most integrated public engagement process, from the project idea conception to the grant writing, all the way through with regards to CAC participation on the grant management team, and then also working with the engagement piece of the project. So before we start the presentation, I do want to clarify the action that we're looking for and that we'll be requesting at the end of the meeting. First of all, today is not a public hearing on ZDO amendments. Today is an opportunity for this Community Advisory Committee to share with you their work and help you understand about what they put together with respect to the guiding principles, the framework plan, as well as the recommendations related to the types of changes that will be needed to support the community vision. So the types of changes that would be needed to the development design standards. So they will ask you to acknowledge their work and then move the development and design standard recommendations with regards to changes to the ZDO and the comp plan amendment into the process that involves a planning commission. So if you support moving these items forward into the ZDO and comp plan amendment process, there will be public hearings and there'll be other opportunities for engagement if they're needed. And if moved forward after the public hearing with the Planning Commission will develop a recommendation to you. And then there will be a public hearing with the board. And at that point in time is the actual time that changes to the ZDO and ZDO amendments are considered. So all of that process, if the board chooses to move this into the ZDO amendment process, would happen at the beginning of 2021. So let's start the presentation. So first I wanted to start with the fact that the Community Advisory Committee was really a broad set of members. We came to you in August of 2019, and you approved this list of members. They represent a variety of different occupations. For the most part, they were people that were living or working in the 1/2 mile study area. Over the course of the project, we did have 4 people who officially resigned from the committee. Some of that was as a result of our shifting to a Zoom online platform, but we really had lots of different opportunities for people to participate. So I'm not going to go through this list of members, but as we said right at the beginning, we have 4 members here today to provide the presentation to you. So today's agenda is I will be providing a little project context. Anne will discuss the guiding principles. And this guiding principles was also brought to you at a previous BCC meeting. Valerie will talk about the framework plan. Craig and Sherry will discuss the development and design standard recommendations. Erin will touch on the implementation items. And then Valerie and Anne will, Valerie and myself will talk about the recommendations. So getting us grounded, reminding us all where we were and where the Park Avenue project area is. It's specifically 1/2 mile around the Park Avenue light rail station. So on this map, as you can see, there is the area to the north that's in gray. That actually is in the city of Milwaukee. So our project area really focused on the area that's not in the gray, but in the different colors. The colors of this map distinguish where the residential areas are, and then the commercial areas, those being the pink areas along McLaughlin, and then the medium density residential areas, which is the orange areas between the pink areas and Oatfield, or the pink areas and Linden Lane. So one of the ways that I wanted to start off this presentation was to really tie the work that the Community Advisory Committee has been doing and how it relates to the board's performance Clackamas goals. So as you know, the board has goals for increasing housing opportunities. It has goals related to supporting a healthy and active lifestyle while focusing on creating walkable communities. There's also board goals related to supporting efforts to stimulate the development of workforce housing by increasing the development of housing and how it is connected to the work that we're doing really is related to increasing the density of housing within the commercial areas. DTD itself has strategic plan, has specific plan goals, and this helps us achieve those plan goals because this is a project that has been on the long range planning work program, and we're looking forward to its completion. Also, part of our plan goals in DTD is talking about engagement with communities and improving that engagement. So one last thing, and I wanted to call out, was the fact that this project really is in alignment with the 5 components of the McLaughlin Area Plan. This was approved by the Board of County Commissioners in March of 2016. And as a part of those 5 components in the McLaughlin Area Plan, there's specifically a project that's called out that talks about providing for standards that allow development of commercial or mixed-use activity clusters at targeted locations in the plan area. So looking at that broad picture and how the work then that the Community Advisory Committee has done to be able to achieve those goals. One of the things that I'd say is the Community Advisory Committee has really taken on the hard work of figuring out how to make these goals happen and how these goals apply within that area that we are talking about, which is the 1/2 area around the Park Avenue station. So before I leave this, I do want to touch briefly on the engagement that was done throughout the project. Now, a full community engagement report was included in your materials as attachment 6. I recognize that there were a lot of materials, but that engagement report does outline the type of engagement that was done. It includes information and feedback from the different surveys. But a couple of highlights that I would really like to pull out is the fact that during this project, there were 3 public workshops or online presentations. There are also 3 different online surveys. All of the results from those surveys are in that attachment. That really allowed us to reach out to the public and to make sure that the advisory committee, as they were making their decisions and their recommendations, they were influenced and they understood what the broader community was interested in. So as a part of that outreach activity, the Guiding Principles workshop had over 40 participants. We had survey results and survey participation. The strongest survey participation was our framework plan survey, where over 280 people answered questions and went through the survey to provide input. Our last survey also had over 125 people participate and provide very detailed feedback about their interests in the area. I think it took on average someone about 20 minutes to complete that survey. So people were very committed to participating. So in addition to these opportunities, there were stakeholder interviews with developers and opportunities for commercial property owners to participate in a focus group. We also did some door-to-door going out to the different apartment complexes in the area and the businesses to be able to let them know these different surveys were going on. In another attachment, I believe it's the implementation attachment, it actually outlines some of the work that MISO has done to be able to engage with some of the local businesses in the area. Let's see, oops. So a quick project history. As you have, let's see, I am just going to, sorry you guys, I'm gonna make you sick here. So as you guys know, this project has a really long project history. You know, it goes back almost 10 years with the first Park Avenue Station Plan project. There was that attempt, and at that point in time, 10 years ago, there was the decision not to move forward with adopting anything. At that point in time, there was some concerns by the public that the process had not had enough engagement. There were interests in being able to make sure that the community was very much involved in the project. So for this particular second phase of the project, we have been going strong since August of 2019, so over the past year. During that time, we've had 16 community advisory committee meetings. There's been 33 grant team meetings. And as I mentioned before, 3 workshops and 3 different surveys and an assortment of other engagement opportunities for people to participate. So here, I think is also an important point for folks to recognize is that while our outreach and engagement was focused on that half mile around the Park Avenue station, which included both residential and commercial areas, the changes, the recommendations related to changes in the development design standards are only focused in the existing general commercial area, as well as the existing medium density residential area. So while there is the broader engagement area, really the changes are focused in a much more narrow area. So this gives you sort of an aerial view of where those existing zones are. So this taking away the zones, what you can really notice here, you can even see the more grayed out area where there's more pavement and parking lots and roads. That's the commercial area that along McLaughlin. And then this photo provides you with an opportunity, the ability to see, so that line there that you see is about a half a mile. So what is important about this sort of half a mile in this distance is really you begin to see that there's this lack of connections. The ability to cross McLaughlin is really challenging, and it's really challenging for pedestrians to get around this area and be able to access different points. And then finally, before I pass it off, this is just kind of setting the stage. This allows folks to kind of see what the conditions of McLaughlin are like right now. The pedestrian environment is quite rough. It doesn't have sidewalks on both sides of the street. And so, and as you know, that it's, and we just touched on, is that there are very few crossings along McLaughlin in this area. So I think that I've said enough for now. And the next thing is Anne is going to speak to the guiding principles.
Thank you. My name is Ann Muir, and I'm a resident of this area. I own my house and live on Oatfield, and my property backs up to the industrial in part too. Though it's in the residential part. So I'm right in the middle of all of this discussion. So I wanted to just make that clear so you know my perspective. So the public engagement was the key part of our process. It was the most important element as we decided how to put things together. And for the guiding principles, which is the foundation of the work, we began first inside the committee itself with people bringing ideas in and pictures of places that they think of as healthy, attractive places to live. And so we just started with those in the committee in order to get our imaginations running to see what the area might look like. As we know, the area from the last picture we saw is pretty bare of anything that looks like a healthy, fun place to be. So we started with the committee there, and the committee put together, we worked on identifying those and came up with sort of 6 categories. And then we took it to the community, which is the slide we just lost here, was at our first big workshop. And fortunately, because we need the voice to voice, face to face, and you can see the interactive drawing pictures, drawing over maps, we were able to do that because that was pre-COVID. So we got a good start with that that we needed. And from there, we still met for several times as the committee as we honed together the words then of our principles. Now we can go to the next slide. So the guiding principles is the values and the visions. And we arrived at this set of 6 core principles: increase employment opportunities, increase the diversity and accessibility of housing choices, provide safe connections, cultivate a heart and hub of neighborhood activity, treat natural systems as an integral part of our community identity, and promote a healthy and resilient community. Well, those are the 6 guiding principles that we came up with. And it took us actually about, I think we spent almost 5 months just getting to this part. So I wanted to really emphasize how much discussion not only in the committee, but in the community and with the online surveys, that we just really worked hard to get to this point. And the reason we wanted to work so hard to really make this the voice of the people is because this then becomes the plumb line as we go through the project pieces. Anything we are discussing, we say, well, how does that fit with the guiding principle? And someone might say, well, that doesn't sound like what we wanted when we were working on number 4 or number 5. So it was a very important beginning, and in my view, an incredibly productive beginning that really brought the community into this project.
Good morning. My name is Valerie Chapman. I am the chair of the Park Avenue Committee. And like Ann, I also live inside the project area. I live a half a block from the trolley trail on Evergreen Street, a couple blocks from the transit center. So this is my home area where I've lived for almost 40 years. So good. Good morning, Chair Bernard and commissioners. I really appreciate this opportunity to present to you. The framework plan, I want to call out just to point out to begin with, it's like the 30,000 foot level. So it was based on multiple discussions inside the advisory committee and had many revisions. We had many different framework plans we looked at and kept adapting, as Ann said, to coincide with our guiding principles to make sure that they represented the values of the community. There will be many details in the project as the project moves forward. On the ground details will have to be worked out, but this is the larger view of what we wanted. What the framework plan focuses on are changes within the commercial and multifamily zones that will make the area friendlier to people who live, work, shop in the area, while providing opportunities to increase options for housing, which is very much needed, and also to increase the access for the businesses that already exist and for businesses that we hope will come into the area. So improvements are needed along existing streets, and the framework plan calls for new connections to be added to create a more walkable area, particularly within the commercial zone. These streets and new connections should become green connections that would have landscaping and trees throughout that will create a more enjoyable, livable area for everyone. And the new crossings are really an important feature of the framework because they provide the safe connections for pedestrians to cross McLaughlin in multiple locations, while at the same time they preserve the integrity of the trolley trail, which was very important to the Park Avenue community. So you'll see that they are approximately at Silver Springs and at Torbank with those dotted lines, and you see them coming west into towards the river, but not going all the way down to the trolley trail, except for a couple places to keep that integrity, but to increase the ability for people to move around easily. And those will be bike trails as well. And then there are designated activity hubs, and these will create new centers for both community and local business activity, possibly along McLaughlin itself, but also the new connections at Silver Springs and Torbank. And there's I'm sure you've seen this, so you see all of the guidelines, the key and the legend for all of the different pieces. But it does create those new areas and for circulation of people that visit there and and open it up for business access as well. And it took us a long time to get there. I just want to say that, working on that framework plan.
Thank you, Valerie. So the next step is we're going to talk about the development and design standards. And this is really the piece that starts talking about these elements that would move forward into the ZDO amendment process. So with that, I'm going to have Craig start on this piece.
Okay, thanks, Karen. And thank you, Valerie. Appreciate that. This is, I just want to say this is a new process for me. So I want to say thank you to Chairman Bernard and the county commissioners for allowing me to participate in this process. I think it's a very valuable process, and I learned a lot, certainly about the planning work that the county takes on, and to hear from all the folks that were on the committee that I participated in. So it was both a learning experience and a pleasure to serve. So thanks for letting me be part of that. I'm going to focus on 4 proposed changes. And as Karen said, I'm going to tackle the general commercial C3 lands, and then Sherry's going to pick up the medium density MR land proposals. So we have 4 of them. You can see them here. So the framework plan that Valerie just described directly informed the changes proposed to the development and design standards. So all the work that we did to get to that framework plan is what drives these 4 proposals. At a high level, we're proposing number 1, increased flexibility for new housing in the commercial and multifamily zone areas. Restrictions to uses that detract from walkability and provide few jobs, and incorporating new connections for pedestrians and bicyclists, and design requirements to make development in the area more attractive and engaging for people traveling on foot and bikes. So think about increased flexibility in housing, allowing opportunities for manufacturing, small scale, building designs, and then limiting new auto-oriented uses in the property. So the first change that we're proposing is to remove the density limit on multifamily development in C3. The commercial area along McLaughlin already allows residential development, but a density that is so low it doesn't allow for multifamily developments. We want to provide more flexibility to support our guiding principles of increasing the diversity of housing choices in the area specifically. Other areas in the county around light rail stations currently do not limit multifamily density. In addition, interviews with developers suggest that this would allow flexibility with developing their projects. So again, the proposal on the rezoning of this area for higher density housing. Change number 2, or actually this gives you an idea of the type of housing that came out of the survey that was done in September. So as Karen said, there was an online survey. We had 125 participants. It did take people a little while to get through it, but the end result was feedback that we were looking for of the types of desirable housing that could be considered developed along this half-mile stretch. So you can see the first choice was mid-rise and mixed use. Second was low-rise, 2 to 3 stories, and the third choice is the mid-rise, 3 to 5 stories. So it gave us an opportunity to get some feedback from residents in the area of what they would like to see should we be able to do some rezoning and development along this stretch of McLaughlin. Change number 2. There are some limitations on the type of employment use that are allowed. And again, we want to provide more flexibility for uses that encourage new employment opportunities and promote innovation in our neighborhoods. So what we're after is the flexibility to stimulate innovation in the area, maybe a live-work type of environment, create more walkable opportunities for people that live in the area to have access to businesses, shops, and so forth along McLaughlin. Okay, next slide. Change number 3 that we're proposing. We'd like to make sure that new development is designed in a way that is inviting and engaging. Specific design standards for development in the C3 zone of the Park Avenue area are recommended. New requirements for active design elements on the ground floor buildings will help us accomplish this. So again, we're looking for changes in the zoning with respect to setback, creating greater access for people walking through the area, biking through the area, being able to access businesses, living environments, and so forth. Think about some of the original discussions going back 10 years ago to that original plan and then carrying it forward. I think a lot of what we're after is creating a sense of community for people that live and work in the area, or maybe a greater sense of community for people that live and work in the area. So yes. So this question came up a couple of times when we were going through the design discussions. And we want to make sure that it's clear as we go through this presentation and afterwards that we are recommending not to require ground floor retail in new development. That was a point of discussion over several meetings. I think we all, as we drive around this kind of southeast part of the metro area, a lot of new development has ground floor retail, and you can see that they're vacant. That was a critical point of discussion, that we did not want to replicate that same type of challenge, but to provide a sense that that ground floor building elements of design would fit with the overall design scope of the area, but there wouldn't be a hard and fast requirement that it would be specific for retail or office space. It could be kind of more of a flexible consideration. Change number 4. In the C3, we're also asking to replace some restrictions on the development of new auto-oriented uses and self-storage facilities. These uses currently occupy large areas of land while creating few jobs and making the experience of our neighborhood, in some cases, a bit unpleasant, particularly for those walking and biking. And as Karen pointed out, the sidewalks along McLaughlin can be a little bit treacherous, and there's not good crossing from one side to the other. For the area around the transit station, we feel there are uses more aligned with the community values that we identified through our guiding principles that we'd like to see. We understand that this is a challenging topic. There'll be more discussion about it, but we think that future uses are best served for the housing, the jobs, neighborhood development, and really building a sense of community. We got feedback on these 2 points, very specifically, the use for auto-oriented services, and then also self-storage. So this was part of that survey in September, where we had 125 respondents. You can see the responses to the questions about restrictions on new car lots and oriented uses. So 111 out of the 125 said yes, they thought there should be limitations. And the same thing held true for the self-storage facilities in this particular area. So 105 out of the 125 supported limitation of development. So to kind of wrap it up and recap it, our vision is for transformation of this area. We want to focus on housing, workforce housing, the creation of jobs, businesses that support neighborhood and livability, and try to really create that vibe of a sense of community where people can live and work and shop. So, Karen?
Great. Thank you, Craig. And I'm going to jump in here just real quick because I know that we're only have about 7 minutes or so left, but I do want to address a couple of specific things. So I do know that the board has received letters, a letter from MABA identifying that this particular issue around limiting of uses is a concern to them. And I do want to also recognize that there was a petition submitted. That same petition was submitted to the CAC members, and they considered that petition as they developed their recommendation. I do want to call out just to make sure that folks know that if you have an existing auto-oriented business, and there are actually several, I believe there's 15 different auto-oriented businesses currently just within this particular area. Those business owners can continue to do that business. So by changing the development and design standards, it would not cause them to stop doing their business. There are just restrictions if they do end up stopping that business and not doing it for a year. So we can get deeper into some of these issues during the question and answer period, but I did really want to call out that we know that these concerns have been brought forward, and we look forward to the opportunity to be able to talk about them more deeply. But now I'm going to pass the presentation back over to Sherry.
Hi, good morning, Chair Bernard and commissioners. It's my pleasure to be able to talk to you this morning about the Park Avenue community, the changes here, the changes to the multifamily, actually it's medium density residential zone. I live in Milwaukee and I work for an affordable housing developer. I've been in affordable housing for a long time. So I was participating on this community advisory committee with that mindset of allowing, other types of housing. And I think we did a really good job of reaching out to the community and seeing what they were interested in seeing in this area as well. So I'm going to briefly talk to you about the 3 proposed changes in the MR1 zone. And those are allowing cottage cluster housing at higher densities. And then, excuse me, haven't talked much this morning. And requiring new pedestrian and bicycle connections, as well as modifying on-street parking requirements. So this first proposed change would be to add cottage clusters allowable at 25 units per acre. The MR1 area currently allows townhome and multifamily development, but this would change it to allow the cottage clusters, which are multiple small homes on a shared lot with a shared open space. This creates a new opportunity to increase the diversity and flexibility of housing choices in the area. And these were the development types most desirable in the MR1 zone that we heard about when we did the September 2020 survey. The very first one was cottage cluster at 41% of the population or the respondents being interested in seeing that type of housing. And then followed by townhomes at 39% and mid-rise housing at also 39%, and then low-rise housing at 36%. And 35% of the population actually liked all of those. So this second change would be requiring pedestrian and bike connections in both the C3 and MR1 areas. It would help provide more and safer options for people traveling on foot or by bike, and will help provide much needed access to transit in the area. So as you all saw in the beginning, and I'm sure everybody knows, there's very few connections for pedestrians. It's not very walkable right now, and this would help to facilitate that in the area. And the third change, which is near and dear to my heart as an affordable housing developer, would be to revise the parking standards to address the multifamily housing near the transit, Park Avenue Station, age restrictions, and other factors. So this will offer more flexibility and promote the availability of shared parking and bike parking. In addition, the multifamily developments have reduced parking requirements and additional reductions available for affordable units and age-restricted units. And as you might know, parking requirements are relatively high in this area, and it just really is helpful when developers come in to be able to have those flexible parking standards to be able to, provide additional units instead of surface parking, which there already seems to be a lot of here in this area.
So now we're going to transition to Erin to talk a little bit about implementation.
Thank you, Karen, and thank you, Chair Bernard, and all of the commissioners this morning. Again, we really appreciate your time. So updating the development and design standards is the first really critical step to making the community vision that was articulated in the guiding principles and the framework plan a reality. But creating a great, walkable, vibrant neighborhood really takes quite a bit of care and nurturing. And implementing the community vision for Park Ave is really just the beginning. So the development design standards are critical, but on their own, they can only accomplish so much. So that's why we have, as a consultant team, put together this list of items for future implementation. And I realize that this is a big, long list. We don't expect you to read through all of this, but it is in your packets. And these things range from community investment strategies for support for local businesses, residential anti-displacement measures, community building events and programming. Again, we're not going to go through all of these items today. And we realize that all of these things can't happen at once. So we wanted to highlight just a few priority items that really rose to the surface through our project. So the first is looking into financing and incentive options to help encourage a diversity of development that we've heard that this community is looking for, because the market on its own is unlikely to be able to provide this, at least at first. So when you look around the region at other neighborhoods and communities that have undertaken similar project efforts, places like Beaverton, Gresham, even Milwaukee, most of those places have helped to catalyze some of the initial development that they've seen through some type of financial incentive program. So that's what we're recommending here. The second is developing a residential anti-displacement plan for the area. So we put together a list of best practices as part of this project, but we think that that really needs to go further. So while this project doesn't directly impact the single family residential areas, we were really focused on the commercial zone, and the impacts to the multifamily residential zone are pretty limited. We know that there are going to be ripple effects in the surrounding neighborhoods. So now is really the time to get ahead of this and start to develop strategies to help existing residents stay in the neighborhood, even as redevelopment occurs and you start to create this great walkable place to be. And then finally, the proposed updates to the development and design standards include requirements for a number of new connections in the commercial zone in particular to create more walkable and bikeable blocks. And this is a great start, but we highly recommend that taking this a step further through a connectivity and streetscape plan for the area to better define what those connections and street improvements to existing streets should look and feel like, because those paths and streets are really going to be the backbone of public space in the Park Avenue neighborhood. So I'm going to leave it there on the implementation items for now and turn it back over to Valerie and Karen.
Oh. Valerie, I just think, yeah, perfect.
Unmute. So now, as the work of the Park Avenue Community Advisory Committee comes to an end, and just before making a recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners, I'd like to acknowledge the input that was received from MAPIT. MAPIT has been an important partner throughout this process. Karen Bjorklund, who is the chair of MAPIT, participated as an integral member of the grant management team. I am also a member of MAPIT, and I'm the only member of MAPIT that actually lives in the Park Avenue project area, and therefore I was responsible for reporting back to MAPIT on a regular basis. As the MAPIT letter recommends, it's important for the public process to move beyond concepts and discuss concrete details and language. This would be done during the ZDO and comprehensive plan amendment process. In addition, the items such as the anti-displacement strategy are important to integrate during the implementation of the project. It's not a one-time action, but instead a multitude of actions that occur while development happens. I would also like to acknowledge once again that this is not the first attempt to create a design and development plan for the Park Avenue area. What's different about this particular attempt is that it has engaged with the community through the community leaders and by way of outreach from the very beginning of the project. I've lived in this area, as I said, almost 40 years. I remember one of the previous attempts when an already formed design and was brought to the community from consultants. And I remember I looked at parts of that design and I thought, you know, the consultants haven't even set foot in the area in question, or they would not have presented a design like that. So that was not the process this time. In fact, there was one afternoon in November where we spent a couple of hours with the consultants walking through the area and talking about what the area was like and really seeing it on the ground. This project reflects that kind of engagement. So thank you all this morning for your attentiveness and your support. And with that, I would like to say that as the Park Avenue Community Advisory Committee, we recommend that the board move to acknowledge the work of the Park Avenue Community Advisory Committee, including guiding principles and our framework plan. And we also recommend that the board move the development and design standards forward into the amendment process.
So thank you, Valerie, and everyone that participated in this presentation. I just wanted to outline that the board does have options, and the options as presented, really the first and second option support the what Valerie and the CAC recommend moving forward with. If they really do highlight that we would continue to work and do outreach with the residential and business community during that amendment process. But the board also has the option to direct staff to not move forward with the development design standards at this time. So finally, the staff recommendation is that you support the Park Avenue Community Advisory Committee recommendation, that the board acknowledges the work completed by the Community Advisory Committee, including the guiding principles, the framework plan, and the proposed development design standards. In addition, we recommend that you direct staff to move into the development design standards into the ZDO amendment process. So with that, that concludes our presentation, and we can be available for questions. And like I said, we have others that I believe are in the attendee list. We have additional consultants. We can answer all types of questions.
All right, so I've got some questions. Right now, Paul and I have our hands up. I was up first, so I'm going to go. First, I want to thank you for the work you've done. I've driven up and down McLaughlin Boulevard a million times, having lived and having a business in downtown Milwaukee. It's been an area that I have intensely thought has the greatest potential in Clackamas County of redevelopment than anywhere else. And that first picture you showed of the gray area really tells the story. I wanted to say a couple of things. One thing is that when we go further, Sherry, I'm glad you were on this group, because I wanted to ask, did you consult with consultants or people who develop what it would take to get them there? And I think some of it you identified parking, but also there should be an incentive for parking. If you build parking in your structure or whatever, or we reduce the parking number if you do something in the project. I want to tell you that my former property is that development in downtown Milwaukee. I have sort of a relationship with the guy who bought it. It is his highest performing property of any he's done. It is rented all the time. However, you know, the retail requirement on the bottom is still has nobody in it. He might have somebody in it, but last time I looked, he didn't. But that's in a downtown. That's quite different from McLaughlin Boulevard. I appreciate that you're talking about anti-displacement. let me see. I know there's another area here. First design project, ask them. Oh, I guess I just wanted to, when Sherry, your comments and I have known 3 developers who have looked at McLaughlin, and the barrier was parking and height. And I think that when it moves to the planning commission to look at this, there needs to definitely be some communication with developers on what it takes for it to pencil out. In Milwaukee, the development that occurred on my property, it was, for me, it wasn't a problem, but for the developer, it was. And they had to pencil that out and get the right investments in order for that project to move forward. So there must be some communication with developers on what makes it work and what doesn't. So Paul and then Sonia.
Yeah, well, first of all, I just want to express my gratitude to everyone involved. Valerie, Anne, all the members of the committee, of course, our people that are presenting today, Sherry and Craig, who sit on the committee. Your work is appreciated. I know how difficult that is. I know how much effort you put in there, and I appreciate both Valerie and Anne reaching out to me along the way, and our conversations and some of the concerns we have, especially with the COVID situation that's upon us. So you all did great work. Sorry, I wasn't able to attend all the meetings, and especially the last one. It happens to be that the night that you held those on are the same nights as the NCPRD meetings and some of the library meetings that are going on at Concord and so on. So Wednesday nights were very busy. So you'll see my name, folks, on some of the, on the minutes. I was able to attend maybe 10, 15 minutes, and usually at the end of the meeting. So I didn't really see as much, experience as much, but certainly there's a lot in the packet and on the website for people to look at, and most of all that's recorded. So yeah, again, heartfelt gratitude as the chair of the MAP 1 process. I wore a couple hats. I wore the hat of being a resident, and I wore the hat of being a business owner at the time. So I think I had the ability at the time to relate directly with the businesses as one of them. And I think that kind of gave me an inroad and an advantage, if you will. And as serving as the chair, perhaps, some influence at the time, which was not 2009, I believe. So they're like 11 or 12 years ago. So there's a lot of moving parts to this, and I'm actually very excited because I think that a transformation is certainly in order. I can certainly agree with a whole lot of not only what was said today, but what's been said all along the way. I think change is really important. I certainly don't want to lose any momentum along the way. I want to point out before I forget that some of the survey data is very interesting to read. However, Dan, I know you're in the audience. Dan Johnson, our DTD director, thank you for forwarding me a lot of that. There's some stuff in the data that in the survey, some of the written comments, if you want to call them written, but typed comments, personal comments, I think are extremely valuable for people to read. And so I just want to point out that I think that we need to, my colleagues, I'm talking to Commissioner Schrader, Commissioner Bernard, Commissioner Fisher, and Commissioner Humberston, who's not with us today. But I think it's important to read all of that, and along with the letter that came from the multicultural collaborative about displacement. I think that's pretty, I think that, I won't say it hammers it home, but I think that their concerns and strategies are something that we need to take into consideration. And I think the timing of what we do next is really important. What the mistake I think that has been made, and everyone, I mean, I'll say everyone, but a lot of our elected leaders admit it. Well, we should have done this first before we did that, because the property was either purchased or the property was this, and the opportunities to maintain some affordability are incredibly important in today's time, and especially along the corridor, especially in this area that experienced a tremendous amount of displacement following the opening of the light rail line in 2015. It was only months afterwards where rents went up considerably. The market prevailed, and there was opportunity there. And unfortunately, we lost a lot of folks, and our homeless numbers have gone up considerably since then. And now it's a crisis everywhere, but it's obviously most significant right now. Every day, because where I live near McLaughlin. For those who in the audience who don't know that, I live just down the road from this area. So, you know, I see the impacts, and it's just very, even this morning when I went on my walk, it's very sombering to see people that are sleeping on the sidewalk or in the bushes. It's very sombering. It's very sombering to see kids getting out of a car that they're living in and walking into the store. It's just painful. So I think, and I know that when the folks, you all, the committee members of the PAC worked on the guiding principles, I shared, you know, and I know we had a discussion, I think it was guiding principle number 2, you know, that affordability is something that we need to maintain in the area. And I do know the conversations we had, and for those who don't know what that was, it was really that using the word affordable or affordability has some connotations that sometimes are not well received by some people in the community. And I know that was one of the concerns that was brought forth by members of the committee, that some people don't want to see additional affordable housing in the area, or and so there's confusion. I think the confusion with the elected leaders at a number of our tables has been not a lot of people agree that affordable housing is something that we ought to work on, but a lot of people believe, you know, the converse is that housing affordability is very important. So again, housing affordability versus affordable housing, they have two completely different connotations and two different meanings. So, and I'm speaking today about housing affordability and the surrounding area and the halo effect of what we do in McLaughlin or in any particular area has a halo effect outside of the area, whether it's MR1 or the C3 or even the circle itself. It's a draw. And I have people in my own street where I live, where people who moved here simply because they are closer to transit and the light rail line. So that has upped the price in the area and has upped the rents. So with all that said, I think the letter from the collaborative is something that we ought to take seriously. I think the opportunity to do things like land trust, to do things like investing in existing housing that is currently affordable and helping maintain that affordability is investments that should be made prior to any zone changes. It has been, for the audience, frustrating for me. I think my colleagues and my staff know, county staff know, that for a couple years now, I've been trying to put together a forum and discussion for educational purposes on displacement, anti-displacement policies, learned lessons from other areas, both here in Oregon, and other learned lessons from areas that are 5 or 6, 7 years ahead of us in solving those in the Southern California, the Bay Area, Los Angeles County, et cetera. So I think it's important that we get that strategy established before we do much in the way of moving this to a zone change type of scenario, because once that happens, there's, you know, opportunity knocks and developers come in and the prices go up on the land. So that is something we want to, you know, moderate as best as possible, but not discourage any development that would be transformative. And hopefully and ideally, we have landowners or property owners that are willing to do something now. And the good news is that I brought this to the administrator with the folks that the Elks Lodge is certainly interested in doing some affordable housing, a affordable housing project at the Elks Lodge. So we do have some momentum right now with an interested property owner, but we can't ignore, speaking of property owners, we can't ignore the property owners. I think that, you know, the MABA letter, the petition that Karen had cited, we've seen that. I've read the MAPIT letter. I would encourage my colleagues to read the MAPIT letter very carefully as well. It's important, I think, at this point in time to look at the bright side of where we are right now. You know, in the last month or two or so, we now have the plan. We now have something for everyone to chew on, and that is from the great work and the great effort that everyone has provided. So instead of saying the work is done, I think now's the opportunity maybe to sit down with some of the people that are, let's say, unhappy or concerned, and try to mitigate or understand that better, so that when we do send this to the Planning Commission, we got some ideas on solving some of these solutions in advance. Now, I'll use the example. My colleague Martha Schrader and I worked very hard, and we went business to business in the area of the Veterans Village before we even did that project. And that was somewhat of a zone land use change. And we sat down, we had some very difficult decisions, but we came to a good place. And I think right now, based on what I've heard and what I've seen, and the business owners and the properties who are the most affected here for a zone change, at least from their perspective, I can't disagree with some of their statements, that it's time for us to really maybe do that again. So I would ask my colleague Martha if she would be interested in her and I working together to try to sit down with the business owners and get some of these things ironed out, so that we can send this to the Planning Commission in short time, and also sit down with some of our nonprofits and everything else on how we can work on the landscape to keep this area affordable, to do some of the things that are recommended by people that know anti-displacement, so we can get in front of this as opposed to behind it. So that's a lot. The issue of parking, yes, it's huge. Jim, I think your comments are right on. I've met with more than 3 developers over the years, and not only is parking an issue, but the topography is very challenging in this area. The walkability score is affected somewhat by the topography, so that's a huge challenge. So I think, again, I'm excited because we have the finished work. The recommendations. Now there is opportunity for everyone to say, okay, here it is. Let's, I think a little bit more public process, an opportunity to showcase what we've done, hear the feedback is in order. And I know it's extremely difficult with COVID to really do that in a meaningful way. I do know that businesses and people are busy with either trying to stay alive, their businesses, and also, at the holidays. But, I'm definitely willing to, want to, and I'll even make the motion. I'd like to make the motion. I'd like to have the honor of making the motion to accept the work. But I would like to talk and have a discussion about, a somewhat of an opportunity to, before this goes to Planning Commission, for us to do a little bit more outreach, both in respect to the businesses and with respect to some anti-displacement efforts that we can put in place, so we don't impact the most vulnerable people in our community. So I have more to say, but I don't want to take up all the time. I will conclude my remarks for now and build on the conversation as it goes. Thank you.
Sonia and then Martha. We're over time now, so aren't
We
we?
have 11:30.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. I really appreciate the presentation. And it takes me kind of back to when Karen and I were in Atlanta and we went to a walkability, it was a 2-day, or was it 3 days? Well, it was a very involved effort, collaborative effort to really be planful in how we do our work. And this presentation just hits every value that was discussed about that, because we all know if we create communities that promote activity, and that's not just bike paths and walking paths. It's ways that people that use devices can get out safely and be mobile as well, and where there's connection, such as the hubs that are presented for interaction, and all of that promotes healthy lifestyle. And that is wonderful. And that is one of our lenses as a commission that we adopted in our strategic framework. So this is great. So few questions I have. I'm curious how the issue of anti-displacement is being addressed in this plan. That's my first question. I have like 3 questions. That's the first one.
So I'll start off with the answer is that there's 2 different ways we looked at anti-displacement. Both one had to do specifically with business anti-displacement. And that was actually pretty exciting because that really started the county's partnership with MISO and connection with specific businesses in that area and tried to identify exactly what their needs were and their interests. So as a part of your attachments in the implementation piece, there's a discussion of kind of all these different actions that could be taken to really assist businesses to stay in the same place that they're at. And then there also is a memo, as Commissioner Savas identified, that talked about residential anti-displacement and different types of strategies that could be employed as development starts to occur, or before, as Commissioner Savas had indicated, perhaps before development starts to occur. So those were the 2 ways that we started to look at anti-displacement. So Erin, I don't know if you have anything in addition that you would like to add to that.
I think that about covers it. And I guess I would just also emphasize that we incorporated both the business and the residential anti-displacement strategies in the implementation actions that we were recommending very deliberately, knowing that was a big concern for this community and knowing that more work needed to be done. Unfortunately, we were kind of limited on scope and budget with this project. I wish we lived in a world where that were not the case, but we don't. So what we were able to do is lay some groundwork and provide some foundation, but that really is just the starting point. And I think it would be great if the county was able to take that up as an immediate next step moving forward.
Thank you. So my next question, I really loved the picture. I just couldn't quit like staring at it, and I had it up on another screen when you moved on, with all of the pathways, the connections, all of the improvements, the hubs. That graphic is so great. So my question is, how will that be funded? Is the plan that SDCs that are incurred during the course of development will fund that? Was there talk about an urban renewal district? I mean, what are the strategies for how we realize this?
So Sonia, that's an excellent question. And again, I would point to the implementation document that really identifies the fact that there are so many actions that are needed to make this vision of the framework plan a reality. And part of that is investment. And so implementation document does talk about ideas around, different funding sources that could be looked at to be able to make these things happen. Ultimately, the charge of this particular project had to do with recommendations around the development design standards. What needs to happen specifically with the zoning ordinance, zoning or comprehensive plan, that tool to be able to support that framework plan, but also knowing that there's many other tools and many other actions that are needed. So does that answer your question?
So it's a very fancy way of saying we don't know exactly how we're going to fund the changes, but everything's on the table.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Okay. So that's good. So that will be discussions to come, because I think that's important. And then I've read this sentence multiple times and I just don't know what it means. It's on the, oh my goodness. I'm so not good with the mouse when there's 3 screens. it's on the slide of development and design standards overview. And it talks about why is this change proposed? And it talks about the reductions to parking standards within the Park Avenue station. I got that. And then the next sentence is the one I just don't understand. So I'm hoping somebody can explain it. In addition, multifamily dwelling developments have reduced parking requirements and additional reductions available for affordable units and age-restricted units. So I guess I don't know what an age-restricted unit is, and I'm just not quite sure what that sentence is saying.
Certainly. And maybe I'll let Erin answer the question. I mean, I could jump in, but I'll let Erin answer.
Yeah, so that was our way of trying to concisely summarize various parking reductions that will be allowed under different circumstances. So there are parking reductions that we're proposing associated with affordable housing, associated with senior housing. So that's where you get into the age-restricted units. I think that was the intent with that, as well as proximity to transit, provisions for bike parking, shared parking, etc. Does that help clarify that?
Okay, so for senior housing, there'll be less parking.
Required.
There'll be more parking restrictions or reduced parking requirements.
Correct. Reduced parking requirements.
Okay,
so
that helps.
Yeah.
I just didn't know what age restricted unit meant. So
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Okay, Martha? Did Martha leave? Where is she?
I'm muting. I'm here.
There.
I try to keep on mute in case my dogs start to go into a barking frenzy at this point. I just want to thank you for all the work that you've done here, because in all the years I've been here, this is the closest we've come to really implementing a revitalization project in that area. And I would very much like to see this get to the Planning Commission. But my question is this: could you tell me, there seems to be a rub, as there always is, as we work on these big projects with the business community, and you mentioned MISO. What was the process that you followed to connect to those business folks? How many did you directly talk to? Was there any kind of a specific opportunity to pull them together in a forum as a group? And if so, how was that handled? Where's the pushback coming from with this? Because that's what I'm observing with this one group. So could you help me out?
Yeah, thank you very much for that question, because I think there's many different layers. So with respect to the work that MISO did with our economic development group, they both sent letters to business owners to let them know that they would be canvassing the area to connect with business owners. And then this happened in January, February. So their work actually some of their work actually happened before before COVID really hit strongly. So they were able to connect with small business owners, and a lot of the business owners that they connected with actually had businesses in Courtney Plaza. They also had reached out to, I believe it's the Mystery Spot, maybe that's not what it's called, but then another small business on the other side. So they talked to about 10 businesses, I believe, and issues that came up and that were most important to them really had to do with safety and security, had to do with bringing landscaping, making the area more appealable, keeping their business kind of functioning and attracting businesses. So Sandra McLeod, who also was a CAC member, she really was our connection to kind of the broader MABA businesses. She was appointed by MABA and bringing those interests to the table. So the other type of businesses that are in that area, really, like I said before, I kind of looked through, there's kind of a total of 35 different individual sort of business owner or property owners in that commercial area. And there are about 24 different retail uses, just so you have an understanding of kind of what we're talking about. And of those 24 individual, so this is the commercial property owners, not necessarily just business owners, right? There's a difference. But of those 24 commercial property owners that do have retail uses, 15 of them are already being used for auto-oriented uses, right? So car lots, or also storage units. And I think that those are the issues that folks, that MABA, at least my understanding, is concerned about with regards to the changes to the development and design standards, that we would be, that the development and design standards would be restricting future uses similar to that. So there's kind of a slight difference. I don't think MISO connected as closely with the existing auto-oriented uses.
Okay. So what you're saying is, they did work with small businesses, but this pushback is coming from the fear of zone changing. But you've already said that they'd be grandfathered in.
Correct. They would become non-conforming uses. They would be able to continue on as their existing use.
Okay, is there, so I guess my next question is for Commissioner Savas, because this is a concern of the business. Would you suggest some kind of a forum with businesses one more time before? I guess I'm trying to look for a solution here after all the work's been done, because I do think it's been pretty fine work. So what would your thought be in order to, move ahead?
Yeah, I think that if you look at the folks that joined us, Martha, when we went to the Veterans Village area, the businesses, it was I think it was Dan Johnson, I remember, and a couple staff people, so they could provide the technical answers, and ourselves to help talk to them one-on-one. So Karen is correct. They can continue to do what they're doing. However, if they wanted to improve their property or expand their building on their property, there's quite a few restrictions that would not allow some of those improvements to be made. So I don't know all the concerns firsthand. I have over the years that MABA has been in existence, I've reached out to them from time to time to ask to actually speak to them and have an opportunity to sit around the table or whatever it may be and have a discussion. I've never been able to have that discussion. So all my communications have been with individuals here and there, and certainly not all the MABA members, because not all the MABA members have properties within this Park Avenue area. But that would be the construct. I think it would be, I think having the freedom to speak would be probably best in a non-public setting like we did when we met with those businesses. And at least just to understand it, so you can understand it, so I can understand it. And I have a couple ideas, by the way. A couple folks have proposed some ideas to get us, I think, at a decent middle ground so we don't lose momentum. I think it's important that we are cognizant that it's important to keep the momentum that we have. I think it's important that we seize the opportunities that we have. So I think it's incredibly important at this point in time not to upset the people and to find some middle ground. I hope that helps, Martha.
Okay, thanks.
All right, then I have my hand up, and then Paul, and then I hope Paul will make the motion. One thing is, I owned a piece of property in downtown Milwaukee. Our family owned it for 93 years. So I remember when we were doing the downtown plan, even I, as the mayor, was furious that they were making these changes to my property, which I had owned for 93 years, or my family had. And the fact is that it didn't affect me until I decided to make some changes. And I got in a fight with the city at one time because of my warehouse. And they said I had to put in my warehouse a barber shop. Well, this is a 3,000 square foot tin roof warehouse and all these requirements. But it turns out I had a renter that it was a warehouse. So, but it drove me crazy, but it didn't limit my opportunities. The other thing is the first project is the most challenging project. That's the one that gets people moving and gets people thinking. And that project on my property is the first project. And then of course, COVID hit, the economy fell off. And so that's been a challenge. But in order to prevent a displacement, the county needs to invest in whether it's the Elks Lodge or something else on there, so that we can build affordable housing. And the other hot topic was affordable housing. The word itself is challenging. But the fact is, the people working at Fred Meyer's at US Bank, at the ice cream store and all those things all need affordable housing. So it's a big challenge, but it is one that can be mastered. Anyway, Paul, got 6 minutes.
Yeah. Well, thanks. So I know there's not a lot of time, and I'm really looking forward to actually working on both of these. So, Gary's indicated in the chat that we have the anti-displacement discussion, which is probably going to be the first of at least more than one anyhow. And so I'm looking forward to that and lay out some ideas. And I'm happy to actually share some examples of how other areas, especially outside of Oregon, frankly, have navigated through all of this. And I think in a pretty good way. So I'm happy to share some of those ideas on December 15th. I think that having the opportunity to work with the businesses as best as possible and do some of the early work in advance of taking this to the Planning Commission is important, that we have a strategy. And lastly, I think we also need to have a session with our DTD folks, our planning folks, to talk about really the question that Commissioner Fisher so eloquently touched on there, and that was cost. There is a cost to the infrastructure for all of this. And if you look at that, there are roads, there are aspects. So we need to figure out a way to pay for this to make sure it happens. And we got to realize what can be borne and paid for with SDCs and how to fill the gaps that the SDCs don't cover. So with that, I think we have 3 things to knock out, in advance, so that we go about this as strategically, cerebrally as we can, so that we don't make some of the mistakes other regions have made, and the prices just start skyrocketing and make just everything just out of reach. So I will kind of end my comments there, and I'm going to make a motion, and I'd like to make another motion after that, but I want to take them one at a time. So I move to accept option 1, to move to accept the work of the Park Avenue project.
Second.
Sorry.
All right, any further discussion? Danny, Christina, please poll us.
Okay, Commissioner Fisher,
Aye.
Commissioner Sevis,
Aye.
Commissioner Schrader,
Aye.
and Chair Bernard.
Aye, motion carries unanimously. Paul?
Yeah, so I have a hybrid. What I'd like to do is not option 2 or 3. It is something in between. I don't want to accept number 3 and say we're not going to do something, because that is certainly not the intent here. But I would like to make a motion to put together a work session for next steps with the Board of County Commissioners to tackle, number 1, our anti-displacement strategy. Number 2, outreach program or effort for the businesses. And number 3, Paul, where did number 3 go? Oh, I forgot it, darn it. But I think that'll do it. I mean, so that's my motion. I'm going to restate the motion. The motion is to put together a work session, direct staff to put together a work session to discuss anti-displacement and outreach to the businesses. And third, work with, sit down with DTD and work on how we are going to finance some of the infrastructure improvements required. So that's my motion.
So that's before it goes to the planning commission?
Well, just a work session before, not to do all of that before then, but to have a work session to talk about those 3 items. So there'll be one work session to talk about those 3 items.
Well, we have a work session the 15th on anti-displacement. Sonia, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I'm just ready to move forward with the, option 1 is move forward with this. And I don't want to qualify it at all. I think that the intention and the values of this board and I'm pretty sure future boards are going to be very aligned in the interest in anti-displacement. And while we've been sitting here, I was so pleased to dig a little deeper into all of the work that the committee did with addressing these issues. And I don't want us to qualify this. I want us to move forward.
And I agree. So I'm not going to second that motion. But we had 2 we needed to do, 1 and 2, right, Karen? And number 2 is approve moving forward the proposed draft development and design standard recommendation into the zoning amendment process, correct?
Correct.
That's my motion. For a second.
So I'm not going to second, but I'm going to make a comment about this. I think the fear is what I'm picking up on is, this has been an area that's been under discussion since 2003, and we're kind of so close. And my fear is if we don't take into account some of this other restlessness, it could get totally off track. That's just my observation, having been involved with all of this for so many years. And do we have to make motions on those other 2 pieces today? Or could we come up with something where, as Commissioner Savas said, where we just have one more conversation, maybe specifically with the mama group and get a sense of where they're coming from? What's the timeline? Is the timeline hypercritical at this point?
What year did you say we started? So I guess it isn't.
But if you don't mind, I could interject for a second, is that I do think that we could fold into the process as we move the development design standards forward, a meeting just as Commissioner Savas had described, with the commercial property owners and whatnot, and use that to feed into the planning commission process. I think that allows, and I do think that through the letter from MAPIT really talked about the desire to see those specific ZDO language changes. And so this allows us to have those specific ZDO language changes and be able to discuss that with the commercial property owners. And then we would take it to the planning commission. So
Okay.
I think,
would that be adequate? That sounds like it would be a good way to progress.
so I think you could qualify the motion by saying move the development design standards forward into the ZDO amendment process with a meeting with the commercial property owners.
Okay, Paul?
Is that acceptable to the?
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that, but that really doesn't talk about all the preventative early step measures required for anti-displacement. So I think that's important. And Martha, I think you brought up a good point. We don't have to do anything today. I try to make a motion to do something that would keep the momentum going, because I want to definitely keep this up front and center. But I want to just give you all a word of caution. And Martha, I know you're going to get this, but I guess maybe I'm talking to Jim here more than anyone. There have been considerable discussions and assumptions and statements, and I don't disagree with them, that there are elements of what we're doing here at Park Avenue that are going to move down the boulevard and can improve the entire boulevard. Okay. If we just ignore the sensitivities of the businesses and everyone else, and that of the people that are, you know, on the edge of, and sometimes in tears about their fear of losing their home. Okay, if we put all that and just forge forward without taking that into consideration, I don't think we're setting a good track record, and we're going to lose the trust of a lot of businesses in this area and a lot of people that we're not listening to them as carefully as we should. We now have a plan. It's only 30, the ink's barely dry on this. We have an opportunity to move this and to work with people. And I think that we need to be considerate of all those elements. And if we just forge ahead immediately without taking all that into consideration, I don't think we're doing our job. And I think we're going to make life miserable for the rest of the boulevard and projects going forward. We need to establish trust. And I want to, especially with someone who lives here, especially with someone who is friends with a lot of people who live here, let alone the businesses as well. We just can't be seen as being aggressive and bullying this forward.
So this group spent a half a year on guiding principles, which are moving forward with this agreement. Those guiding principles addressed every single issue you're talking about. And as our recommendation to move forward in proposed draft development of design standards include those 6 guiding principles, which all address those issues. This is something that has been delayed. My first involvement in government was back with you and Ed on the McLaughlin transportation plan before I was mayor, so over 20 years ago. I think it's time to move forward and include those guiding principles along with time to discuss with the businesses the facts, what to address their concerns. But I don't think, I'm not going to be here, and you can delay this another 20 years if you like. I don't care.
No one's delaying anything, Jim, and I think your guiding principles is not touching on the topic I'm bringing up. There's not a delay here. It's not a matter of delay. And I'm talking about next steps. I made it perfectly clear. I don't appreciate you saying delay. There's no intent here to delay. I actually take exception to that, Jim.
All right, fine. I appreciate that. Sonia?
So as I read option 2, I think we can adopt option 2, which is kind of long, but I'm going to read it. Direct staff to move forward with proposed development design standards to Planning and Zoning Division to begin consideration of amendments to the zoning development ordinance and comprehensive plan, working with the routine process with the Planning Commission and Board of County Commissioners with outreach to the residential and business community, which we've talked about that. And I think we could also add, and development of a policy framework around anti-displacement.
Second.
Could you, that was a motion?
Yeah.
Could you repeat that, please?
Okay, it's what's option 2. And then I wanted to add with the development of an anti-displacement framework. I think that's really important, Paul, and I applaud you for pushing this issue because it's critical that we do that. So I'm perfectly good about codifying that in a motion, as long as Karen says that's okay.
Well, Sonia, I don't know if you remember a conversation with our housing committee that we put together. You and I attended a lot of those meetings. I know you didn't attend all of them. I didn't attend all of them either, but there was one in particular where this conversation came up. And what it was an early on strategy prior to any zone changes. It was made by an employee that worked for the city of Milwaukee. She has experience. She was brilliant. She was one of the people I'm hoping that we can talk to. And there's no harm in having the session on December 15th before we go ahead. As soon as you signal out there to the world that you're making a zone change, and here it is, you know, without those bookends, so to speak, and without that mitigation aspect, that's going to trigger investments and market price increases, and that's going to just drive people out. We have to move carefully.
So there's a motion on the floor and a second. Any further discussion on the motion?
Well, the motion was only for anti-displacement, so I can't support it.
All right.
It doesn't cover the three. This does not cover the three elements.
Okay.
Oh, what's the other element? It covers outreach, anti-displacement. What's the third?
Well, it was business outreach. It was.
Yeah, that's there.
Well, I think when you repeated it back, all I heard, maybe I mistakenly heard what you said, but when you repeated it back, you said displacement, outreach.
Okay, so it's what has been written for us in the packet, which talks about with outreach to the residential and business community. And then my suggested was and the development of an anti-displacement policy framework.
Well, they need to be sequential, not parallel.
Okay, then.
So what I mean by that is that.
Okay, let me ask a question in lieu of what I think you're going to say, Karen. Is it possible to parallel track? It sounds like it's been happening. The anti-displacement discussion, which is evidenced throughout all of the materials, has been occurring through this process. Can we do this together? If we send this to the Planning Commission to go through the normal course in the process, can we also work on an anti-displacement policy to inform the future changes that will happen to the area?
So I would say that the board is taking the right steps in that they have an anti-displacement policy session on December 15th. How I would anticipate the process going with regards to moving the development design standards forward into the ZDO amendment is the first thing that the staff would do is to take the information and develop specific code amendment changes. We would then be able to meet with the business and the commercial property owners and discuss the specifics about that, as well as the specifics about what it means to be a non-conforming use and to be able to get feedback on that. And then when we got that feedback, we would be able to take that information to the Planning Commission and be able to inform the recommendations that move forward to the Planning Commission, and then allow for that public hearing within the Planning Commission, which then it would then move forward to the board with the Planning Commission recommendation.
So we can incorporate an anti-displacement framework within the steps of approving or going through the Planning Commission and all of the steps, because there's a lot that still needs to be done. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Yes, I would say that could be done.
Okay.
Paul?
I got to respond here. So I'm a little bit upset, Jim, that you said that I'm delaying this. I'm gonna hammer this home. Okay, I've been at this for 2 years trying to get a work session on anti-displacement. That was delayed, not at my wish. It was delayed. I tried to get involvement with the businesses. I tried to get us to slow down a little bit because of COVID. Dan Johnson, you know, if he was in front of us right now, he would be nodding his head that many times we try to make sure that we didn't get where we are, that we had everyone on board. Even the board agreed. What success looks like is everyone pulling together and no dissension. I try to get in front of this. Okay, so I really am insulted the fact that anyone would say or suggest that there's a delay here. What was delayed were all the things that I'm talking about right now. Everything I'm bringing up right now is what I wanted to talk about a long time ago. So you know, the fact of the matter is, unless it's more detailed, Sonia, what I mean by sequential is that I think the first thing we need to do, number one, is talk with the businesses and work through this so they fully understand what's going on, present them the materials, talk to them in a way that they feel they're listened to. And I think with 2 commissioners, they might have the impetus to sit down with us. Number 2, we're going to have the work session on displacement and get a strategy in advance. Okay. And then number 3 is figure out how we're going to pay for this. And then, once we have a rough idea what that looks like, then move it on to the planning commission. So the planning commission doesn't get confused and have to wrestle with all this, because if they're parallel, okay, then it's going to come to the dais and we're going to be all over the map.
Okay, so I'm going to rely on Karen's expert advice that we can conduct this all together through the process that's been laid out. And I want to emphasize for the record that making sure that we develop and pursue an anti-displacement framework is really important. I'm going to call for the vote and stop discussion and have us take a vote on my motion that I've made and that Chair Bernard has seconded.
Yes, so Christina, please poll us.
Of course. Commissioner Fisher?
Aye.
Commissioner Savis?
No.
Commissioner Schrader?
Mike's not on, Martha.
I'll say I think this is a compromise, but I would like to be involved with this with Commissioner Savis if possible, and it needs to happen sooner than later, staff. So maybe we can arrange some things more quickly. I don't think it's perfect, but I do think, as I said, we need to move it along. My fear is with my I vote that we will have a group out there. This has happened before. I know all of you have experienced it. We get this close to something and then we get the pushback rebound and I don't want it to fall apart. You know what I mean? I don't. And I don't want all the work that people have done to be for naught. So I'll go ahead with it. Yes, now. Okay.
Thank you. Chair Bernard?
Aye, motion carries through 3-1. All right.
Jim,
Well, I want to thank you guys for your hard work. Yes.
Jim, I don't want my vote as a no vote with this. I don't want that misinterpreted. So I'm going to change my vote to a yes. Okay, but I'm going to tell you right now, I'm going to have a serious conversation with everyone with regard to why this anti-displacement effort was delayed, and how we're going to implement it in advance, that we don't impact any more people in a negative way.
Well, I think the measure that Metro passed on the housing measure is a great opportunity to jump ahead and purchase some of those lands and get some of that anti-displacement. And by the way, Metro's working on the exact same issue. So Paul changed his vote with reservations. Let's just say that. And it passed 4-0. All right. So we'll talk about this on the 15th some more. And okay, so thank you guys for your hard work. I appreciate it. I learned a lot. I'm excited about McLaughlin Boulevard and the future for Clackamas County. And thank you. And we are adjourned.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.